My name is Klaus Reichert. I taught English and comparative literature at the University of Frankfurt, and I was a specialist in drama, especially in Shakespeare and in Joyce.
Perfect.
And I'm one of the jurors for this prize, and among the many books which we have to evaluate, I immediately centered on Guenter Blamberger's Kleist biography, which has been called the definitive life of Kleist for this generation by a reviewer in the Times Literary Supplement. The biography is not only a biography of this destructive and disruptive life, but it also gives a very broad background of German, or rather Prussian history around 1800. Blamberger succeeds in describing the atmosphere of these years under King Ferdinand III, with its sort of leaden atmosphere, its stupor, its boredom, and there was a certain unrest among the intellectuals at the time, among all the intellectuals, and especially among Kleist, who set himself in contrast to everything that had been written by the classic authors, Goethe or the Romantics. And so he couldn't really settle down because he was somebody who nobody had expected. And Blamberger's biography makes it clear that his writings, he is one of the great playwrights that ever occurred in Germany, and one of the great prose writers, that he gives very subtle interpretations of literary works, essays, anecdotes, etc., which have nothing to do with this biography, except that he portrays absolutely disruptive, desperate characters. He's a specialist in crisis, as Blamberger says, and one can say he writes for the future. And it's very strange that his plays are being performed much more than Goethe's plays, for instance, at the present time, or throughout the 20th century. And another thing which may be important for the English audience is that Kleist's syntax translates very badly into English. It is a typical German style with all these clauses and sub-clauses, etc., etc. But when you read Blamberger's interpretations of the plays and of the novellas, then you get an explanation why this style has to be as it is. And through his interpretations, you can read a Kleist which you probably cannot read in an English translation.
We were indeed all very impressed by the biography, so maybe you could say also a little bit about the author.
The author, Guenter Blamberger, is the president of the Kleist Society, also the editor of the Kleist yearbook. He teaches German literature at the University of Cologne, but is the Kleist specialist we have. I mean, we have many Kleist specialists right now, and for the Jubilee there were many books written, published, discussed about Kleist, but I think his is the most comprehensive and gives, I mean, this mixture of writing a life, interpreting the writings of this author, and giving a tableau of the whole background is unique. And he has, of course he knows secondary literature as nobody else. At the same time, he gives completely new insights in certain of his works. For instance, there is a notorious play, Hermannschlacht, which has been exploited by the Nazis to show Kleist as a nationalist writer. But Blamberger shows that the background to this is the first guerrilla war of the Spanish against the French, and he tries to introduce a guerrilla in Russia, which happened actually in history. These small armies sort of freelance warriors who got up there in Silesia or in Prussia or in Saxony or in the Palatinate, etc., etc. And this is very interesting, a completely new interpretation of this play. The characters are all disruptive, destructive, self-destructive, etc. For instance, Penthesilea, one of the most unspeakable plays in world literature, gives a completely new picture of antiquity. At the time, the Greeks, the Romans, were seen with the eyes of Winckelmann, noble simplicity and so on and so forth. But with Kleist, you saw the disruptive, the irrational, the frenzy of the Greeks, which only 2 generations later, maybe 3, with Nietzsche, became a new image of antiquity. But Kleist had it all through his absolutely frantic play, Penthesilea.